Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host, and today we're going to be engaged in the first of what is going to be a series of episodes celebrating the 25th anniversary of my becoming a professional chocolate critic, educator, consultant, and journalist. Before we begin, I want to apologize. I made a scheduling mistake, and so this episode is not available on LinkedIn. And I didn't find out about that until about 45 minutes ago. Tried to reschedule it, but LinkedIn wouldn't let me. My bad. Maybe I was just so excited yesterday. I wasn't paying attention. But before we do begin this episode, I want to point out that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate is sponsored by the members of the Chocolate Life. And I want to thank all of my free members as well as my premium paid members at every single membership tier, whether monthly or annually or the new lifetime membership. I want to thank everybody for supporting me over the past 25 years. I think it's really cool. If you're not a member, what you can do is you can go over to The Chocolate Life. This is the homepage of The Chocolate Life right now. It's live, and there's a join button. You can join as a member. There's always a free membership tier. There are monthly memberships beginning at as little as $5 a month. And we'll get back to that at the end of the episode. I don't want to spend more time there. And if you're watching, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook, because unfortunately we're not on LinkedIn, again, my bad, you can go into the comments or the live chat and you can ask me a question, make me a comment, tell me what it is you think and where it is that I'm going to go. And so with all that out of the way, let us begin the episode. And so here is the post for today's episode. I do a post for every episode of Pod Save Chocolate. This is the post for today's episode. It's a run of show. I had the time to update it so that I could show that, LinkedIn wasn't available. But what I want to do is I want to talk about, I want to start off my 25th anniversary celebration, which will focus primarily in the month of June, but it will carry on through the rest of the year with this. And why today, of all days, am I celebrating it? And that's because coincidentally, it was June 2nd, 2001, so 25 years ago today, that the predecessor to The Chocolate Life, chocophile.com, had its first snapshot by the Wayback Machine at the Internet Archive. And here's what the homepage of Chocophile looked like on that day. And I thought it was coincidental in a sort of weirdly wonderful kind of way that this episode of Pod Save Chocolate fell on the same date. And so I wanted to make this the start, because I didn't have any idea back then that it was necessary to record the exact day when chocophile.com went live. And so this is the first record over here. That's the first record that there is. And I'm looking at the page and I'm looking at this upcoming event notice, which I think is pretty interesting because it's saying Pure Origin, that's the name of the company that I founded to run chocophile.com, will be attending the Fancy Food Show in New York in early July. And so this is also great timing for the start of my chocolate life. And I wanted to highlight that and let you know. And, I think there's a link to the Wayback Machine in that post, and you can go follow the history of it. There's also sort of visual history of the evolution of what the website looked like over the course of the last over the last 25 years, if you want to follow that. So there's history there. But what I want to do is begin today's episode about the 25th anniversary, my 25th anniversary in chocolate, by talking about what the Chocolate Life is. Right? I didn't have this perception. I didn't have ideas that this is what the Chocolate Life was when I started. I'm going to make this a little bigger and easier for you to read. I didn't have any idea what the Chocolate Life was. This is something that happened maybe um, around the time that my book, Discover Chocolate, was published in 2007. But the Chocolate Life for me has become this extension of the Japanese concept of ikigai. So living the chocolate life, or living La Vida Coco, which came before the chocolate life. The living the chocolate life is all about finding something that you enjoy doing and that you're good at, right? Finding something that will benefit other people, finding something that you can make a living at, right? And that's the core of the concept of ikigai, something that you like, something that you're good at, something that helps other people, and something that supports you financially. The chocolate life for me includes another really important aspect, which is one of my goals is to help people find and follow their own chocolate life. I want to inspire people to grab hold of something and make it something that they can pursue, which fulfills them in many, many ways, and then in turn inspires others to find and follow their own chocolate life. And I see the mission of what it is that I've been doing over the past 25 years as moving in this direction. Very, very much. It's about inspiring people with my story, my history, uh, to say that this is something you can do. You can find something that you're passionate about, something that you care about, something you enjoy doing, something that you're good at, there's something that other people want, right? And something that enables you to make a living, and that other people, your children, for example, will look at you and say, yes, this is something that I can do. I have inspired them to do that. And that's what the chocolate life is all about. And that's the framing. I had no clue about this in 2001 when I posted for the first time on chocophile.com. I had no idea what that meant. I had no, that's not what I was doing, but it has become central to what it is that I'm doing. In the now, what, 15, 18 years since the publication of Discover Chocolate. And I'm hoping that what you can do, what you will do, is say, I'd like to do that myself. How do I go do that myself? And you know, at whatever level, because it's so personally fulfilling. And I think that if more people in the world sort of found that confluence of things, I think the world would be certainly a happier place. And I think that that's important, right? But all right. So before the beginning, before there was a chocophile.com, right? Before what it is that before I began to think about this, right? Everything I've done, it says 1996 here, not 1994, and we'll get to that, but 1996 has led to where it is that I am now. I mean, very much not necessarily in a straight line. Okay. And again, while June 2nd, 2001 is the oldest evidence of my debut as a professional chocolate critic, my journey began in 1994. And that is when, coincidentally, I discovered single origin chocolate for the first time. It was before single origin was a term that was widely understood. I was in the south of France on a business trip. I was in Cannes on a business trip. I made a very small decision. Instead of going to the airport and spending my time and my money at duty free, I decided to walk around Cannes, walked into a gourmet grocery store, and saw this large selection of chocolates, including 7 bars from a company I'd never heard of, Bona. So Maison Bona was my introduction to single origin chocolate back in 1994. Now, it turns out coincidentally, again, right? Um, I did not know this at time, and I did not know it until much, much later, that the bars that I found in 1994 had been introduced in 1984 for the 100th anniversary of the Maison Bona beginning to make chocolate. But it turns out that the company's history in pastry and cocoa stretches back at least into the 1750s, another 100 years. right? But it was that 100th anniversary, 1984, I discovered a decade later. And it was fortunate and coincidence that my first introduction, my first discovery of single origin chocolate was that of Bona. So about a month later, I'm in New York City, Manhattan, Upper West Side, where I was living, and I had an entrepreneurial epiphany, right? In the sense that I realized, standing in front of a magazine rack with Wine Spectator and Architectural Digest, Chocolatier magazine, Cigar Aficionado, TV Guide, right? Um, Magazines about the movie industry, right? That there were professional critics for just about everything you could think of, but there were no professional critics for chocolate. So on that afternoon, sometime in March of 1994, I made the decision to become the world's first professional chocolate critic. I didn't have any idea what that meant. I didn't know what I needed to learn. I didn't know where I could need to learn it. Nothing. Right? But I had confidence based upon my previous decades worth of work, and I'll go over some of those experiences. That that the market, right, was going to take another at least 5 years to get where I will to get to that same realization. That a genre of literary criticism, from a professional perspective, not a hobbyist perspective, was one of the things that chocolate was going to need, right, in order to step up and take its place next to wine and beer and cheese and other things like that. And the 1996 date that I mentioned earlier, right, coincides, right, with the launch, or the first rumors of launch, by Scharfenberger. Right? And so here I am in 1994. I don't know if I'm predating what it is that John and Robert are doing, but in my mind, I'm thinking about it. And then there is this event in 1996 with Scharfenberger, right? So again, even there I was in 1994 in a bookstore on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, looking at all these magazines. I trusted my intuition, right? And I leaned into that experience and saying, it's going to take a while, but there's an opportunity for me here because maybe I thought about it first. I didn't know if I did. The internet was not a thing in 1994 the way it is now. And so it was much more difficult to figure it out, right? But what I want to do is set a stage, if I can, and look back to 1983. So this is a decade before I had my entrepreneurial epiphany, and go through to 2001, right? And 2001 is when chocophile.com was launched. So in October, roughly, of 1983, I joined my first high-tech startup. It was in computer graphics. I had graduated from art school, the Rhode Island School of Design, with a major in photography, but I had taken the first computer classes that were offered at RISD. And they were taught by graduate assistants at the Brown University computers from the Brown University Computer Science Department, and specifically were connected with a guy by the name of Andy Van Dam and Dries Van Dam, who was the author of The Fundamentals of Interactive Computer Graphics. And through that class, which was organized by a professor by the name of Mihai Nadine, who's a world famous semiotician. Semiotics was a big thing within the graphic design department when I was at RISD in the early 1980s. During that class, we went up to Cambridge and we went to MIT and visited Muriel Cooper's Visible Language Workshop. And this was the predecessor to MIT's Media Lab. So there I am in 1983, so winter session, January, February of 1983, and I'm sitting down looking at state-of-the-art computer graphics, right? So custom machines, custom hardware, custom software, right? I'm just like, I saw my first computer graphics workstation, an Apollo DN 10,000. This was the Brown Computer Science Department, and it was the first time I ever made the connection between computers can make pictures, and I could be interested in them. And so I had a visceral connection that was made during that winter session class. And when I was presented with the opportunity to join a computer graphics startup, I said yes. right? I'm willing to give up. I'm willing to change course, not give up, but I'm willing to change course and from my intent to become a photographer in New York City, maybe a fashion photographer, a fine arts photographer, some sort of photographer in New York City, and go and work on computer graphics. And I was an artist whose job it was to teach other artists how computers were going to have an impact on their working lives. But I was also given the opportunity to help design the user interfaces and user experiences for 2D paint software, 3D graphics and animation software, business graphics, the predecessors to what we think of as PowerPoint now. Um, I had that opportunity over the course of 4 years, and I got a chance to meet really interesting people during the course of that. Uh, but understanding how to take very, very complicated topics and break them down into simpler topics and explain to people, here's the way computers do it, here's the way you're used to doing it, here's how to think about how computers are going to change the nature of the work that you're doing. And I had that as my full-time job for 4 years, right? During that time, I started writing for trade journals. So I was working for Computer Graphics Monthly. I was writing for Computer Graphics Monthly. I was also for Millimeter Magazine, and I continue to write for trade journals to this day. And so that was an extension of the how do you take very, very complicated topics and talk about them in ways that will engage with people and get them to care about what you're writing about. And it also taught me that one of the most important things I've ever learned when it comes to journalism, which is that if you want people to pick up your phone call, right, time after time after time, right, you don't want to be the one who's asking all of the questions, right? That if you can engage in a dialogue where you're sharing information with whoever on the other end of the phone, so an insight that you've picked up, something that might be related to their business or a product they're making or just something, they're going to want to pick up your phone because they know they're going to learn from you as well. That's that that insight, probably 1985 or so, has been central to one of the reasons why I'm doing what it is that I'm doing right now on the internet, which is I'm sharing with you insights. And so that you will engage with me, that you will learn as much or more from me as I will learn from you. Right? And if and in this case, I'm not making any requirements. I'm not asking for anything before I do that. It's just sharing is important for me. In 1989 or 1990, I'm not exactly sure, but I attended TED 2. So TED is huge today. This was before there were such things as TEDx. The original owners, Richard Saul Wurman, a guy by the name of Harry Marks, who was I knew from broadcast computer graphics. They were the organizers. It was in the Monterey Bay Aquarium is where we met. And I got a chance to meet with people like Herbie Hancock, who was the musical guest, but I also met with Jane Metcalf and Louis Rossetto, who were the co-founders of Wired magazine, right? And they'll show up in my life at times in the future, right? But um, this time, 1983, 1993, this decade was hugely important for the exploration of computer graphics and what it would mean not only in television, but for design. So black and white page design, color prepress. I'm swimming in this technology soup during this entire time. And when I finished my job working with a startup in 1987, early 1988 or 1988, I ended up having some very interesting consulting clients. So I worked for the application systems divisions. I was a consultant on projects to the application systems division of IBM. AGFA was developing the first high resolution PostScript driven high resolution 4K on a 35 millimeter slide film recorder, but driven by a PostScript RIP raster image processing engine. And I wrote the manual for that camera. I worked with Time Warner. on a couple of projects in this time, but one of them had to do with their full service network down in Florida, which had to do with on-demand television. And that project was in conjunction with a little company called Silicon Graphics, who was building some of the hottest computer graphics workstations at the time. This is the soup that I'm swimming in, right? After consulting for 2 or 3 years or so, I went to work for the first high definition television production company in North America. This was a company called Rebo Studio in New York City. This would eventually lead to my writing my first book, published book, which was on high definition video production. And again, I'm traveling around the United States. I'm traveling internationally. I'm having an opportunity to meet with, very high end directors. Very it's just a great place if you're sitting there to learn about stuff. And again, when you're talking about the book on high definition, it's how do you explain how a technology, HD video, is going to have an impact. This is the way you shoot on film. This is the way you shoot on, NTSC Portapacks. This is how the equipment that's available to us now, right, is going to have an impact on the way the future of many aspects of film and television are going to be produced. And one of the experiences is sort of current what's going on is the last time the World Cup was in the United States in Los Angeles. I was involved with the teams that were broadcasting or narrowcasting because there weren't transmitters at the time, but was distributing the World Cup in HD for the first time. It was very, very cool, right? And um, um, I didn't plan any of this. Right? What happened, what happened as I see it now, right, is that I had confidence in my ability to be able to adapt to these new situations and to deliver value to the people I was working with and for and consulting to. Right. And so this shift from fine arts photography into computer graphics into high definition television may not have made a lot of sense to other people, but the arc was obvious to me, which was I am helping people make sense of these rapidly changing technologies, right? And I could combine my understanding of the arts with my understanding of technology and talk to people. And that's what it is that I'm doing to this day. It is still the center of the arc of what it is that I'm doing. Chocolate and cocoa, and they're very complicated, complex topics, right? That involve chemistry and physics and botany and biology. And there are lots of really fine nuances that may not make sense, right? And so a lot of what it is that I'm doing is I'm, again, taking these complex subjects and making them more understandable to people. And I try to do it in a way that people can engage with and get them to care about the topics that I'm talking about. Now, it says here, I'm the co-founder of a company called Enfish Technologies. That was done in 1993. That's a direct connection to all the work that I'm doing right now to try to understand the market for chocolate and cocoa. So how do I understand how to create a database that might have 100,000 entries across a bunch of different topics? How do you normalize and regularize them? How do you think about the importance of an information system? The creation of it's where I first learned about topics like semantic networks and lots of things, right? But those have a direct connection to what it is that I'm doing now. On the surface, maybe like what's this all about? Another startup in information technology. In a weird kind of just as a little aside, one of the patents that I'm a named inventor on was the underlying technology was misappropriated by Microsoft, and it was successfully litigated against Microsoft. And for people who understand about software patents, that litigation established that there are, in fact, subject matter eligible topics in software patents, overcoming. You know, not what I was intending, but it's just a wonderful artifact of what it is that I've done. Now, about the time that all this is happening, I've been working for this HD production company. I'm involved in information technology. I was approached by the organizers of something called Melia. Um, this is the Read Meedem organization, and Melia is an international market for interactive multimedia rights. The same company, Read Meedem, now Read Meedem, just Meedem at the time. The MI stands for Marche International, or International Market. They had been doing markets for film and television rights, and I got connected to them through the HD production that I was doing. And so I was a participant in the world's first interactive multimedia rights markets in Cannes. It was why I was in Cannes in 1994 when I discovered, Bona single origin chocolate for the first time. There's, and it's all there because I don't see the arc of my life, the arc of my career is a linear path. At this point, I don't have a goal. I'm going to do X and Y and Z, and I'm going to retire at 35. This was not the way I thought about my life and career. I thought about, how do I keep engaged? How do I keep learning something new? Where are the next interesting things going to be in the technology that I can apply my background to? So I'm in Melia in 1994. I had the wonderful opportunity to be able to get Jane Metcalf, who again was one of the founders of Wired magazine, and she was a speaker one year at the conference program, which is my primary focus, was the conference programs at these events. So my first book on HD production was published in 1995 and 1996. And it was in 1996, and again, this is why I believe I put 1996 at the top of this post, was I first ran into the true history of chocolate. So in 1996, the first edition was published in 1996, and I found out about it because the woman I would eventually marry, her parents were on the faculty at Yale University, and Michael Coe was on the faculty, who is one of the two authors of The True History of Chocolate, with his wife, then deceased wife, Sophie, was on the faculty, and Brian and Kathy, my in-laws, to be, knew Michael personally and was able to make the connection and say, hey, Clay, you seem to be interested in chocolate. There's this book. And it turns out that this book took my narrow interest in chocolate, which all had to do about tasting it, and expanded the horizons for what I could think about. So there was some history. There was obviously some politics. There was a lot of stuff. So just all of a sudden, the landscape expanded. It became deeper and broader and richer in really important ways through reading the first edition of The True History of Chocolate. And then in 1996 or 1997, Scharfenberger launched, right? And we have, for the first time, a bean-to-bar chocolate maker. Now, a bean-to-bar chocolate maker that self-identified as a bean-to-bar chocolate maker. And when Scharfenberger and Steinberg coined the term, right, what they wanted to do is differentiate what they were doing, which is really about scale and how much hands-on that they were doing, than big industrial chocolate makers in the United States and Europe. So the idea that, yes, they had an automated bean cleaner and machinery for cracking and winnowing, they would not have, they were moving the ingredients from one stage to the next stage by hand. So they moved them from the cleaner to the roaster to the cracker winnower. At that point, they had a large old style Lehman melanger before they put things into conchas. But there was this conscious intent about what they were doing. And we'll get to the intent part of this because I think it's really important. Um, but interestingly enough, even though they were the first quote unquote bean to bar, and again, they saw themselves as doing, um, creating an alternative to Valrhona at the time. They wanted an American version of what Valrhona is doing. John Scharfenberger had come from a background as a champagne blender at Veuve Clicquot, started Scharfenberger wine cellars in um, the Northern California. The reason why Scharfenberger is two words, not one word, is because he sold his name to Scharfenberger wine cellars. And so when they opened the chocolate company, he couldn't use his name. Um, Fun little aside. But they really saw themselves as doing something different. But because John was a champagne blender, they didn't start making single origin chocolates. Scharfenberger didn't start making single origin chocolates at the beginning. Everything was a blend because that's what John knew, right? So after Scharfenberger launches, I lost my job. So I had a big corporate job working for a very large publicly traded company, and they decided they wanted to kick out all the management in the division that I was working in. We had sold this company we had sold a company to this other company, and so I took advantage of the fact that I had a little cash because of the settlement, to go to France, to go to Voiron and meet with Stéphane Bonnat, and travel, and visit and go through his factory. And literally a cold email. I wrote an email and I said, I found your chocolate in 1994. I'm really interested in becoming a chocolate critic. Can I come and visit you? He emailed me back and said yes. So I flew to Paris, got on a train to Lyon, um, high-speed train to Lyon. Then I took a local train down to Voiron, and I remember being in Voiron in the train station and walking down the street to the to Maison Voiron, Maison Bonnat, their house on the street. And if you ever seen one of their bar wrappers, there's a church. That church is directly across the street from them. It's there in the center of Voiron. But I was encouraged by Stéphane Bonnat. He saw something in me. I don't know what it was. Perhaps my enthusiasm, a desire to learn, a willingness to do the work. And he invited me into the factory. He invited me into the shop. He invited me into his home. And I left for the United States, promising to import about a ton of chocolate. Huge samples. I had to buy a bag of chocolate to carry just the chocolate back with me. And this is when I began to think that being a chocolate critic was within my grasp, especially because I had made this connection with somebody whose work I respected. And by the way, I'm completely open right now. When I think about, when I say, "Ooh, this is the chocolate that I really love," this relationship, this discovery in 1994, this first contact with Stefan in 1998, this forms, you know, sort of like my sentimental favorite when I think about what great chocolate is. It's very, very much influenced by that. I think that one of the things a critic needs to do is to present what their biases are. And I am unabashedly, now you may disagree with me, right? But I'm fairly unabashed about sharing that with me. Later in the year, so I'm back in New York. It's Christmas time, and there is an article in the Wednesday food section. Florence Fabricant has published something about gifting for Christmas, and one of the things is a nuancier from Michel Cruel. The nuancier is a tasting box. They produced two. One of the tasting box was single origins, so it was the same percentage with different origins from different parts of the world, and there was another box of the same origin at different percentages. And I realized, looking at that box, that I now had tools that I could use to be able to offer tasting events. That here were things that I could put in front of people and we could explore how percentage changed the perception of flavor, or how the same percentage at different origins for different producing countries would allow me to make the point about chocolate that you would go to if you were going to a wine tasting. All Cabernets, all Cabernet Sauvignons, all Cabernet Francs, all whites, all. So I now had the tools in one box where I didn't have to. I could give tasting events, and this was important to me. I felt it was it was a well-known name of French chocolate. There was the quality was pretty much impeccable. And then I looked up the company that was importing, a company called Vintage Chocolates. You could go on their website and buy them. So I've looked at that, and I went and reached out to Pierrick Chouard, who ran Vintage Chocolates. And within a year, I was working for him, selling chocolate, selling Michel Cluzel and Domori into very high-end restaurants, primarily in the New York City metropolitan area, although also selling chocolate to people on Chocophile.com, to people who were members of Chocophile.com. I could put up a notice and people could find it. So I started my first steps in e-commerce myself back then, and I was that relationship, and where I was actively selling for Pierrick lasted about 4 years. The important thing for me, again, I'm there to learn as much as I possibly can, not just to sell to people, but I'm walking to the executive pastry chef of a Michelin-starred restaurant and having a discussion with the executive, with the chef, about why they're using this chocolate and what they're looking for that chocolate and what they're looking to doing and how flavor and tasting what it is that they're making. This is while I'm on my sales call, and so you know in terms of an education, this is really, really huge, right? And 1999, 2000, this is when I'm finally really starting to wrestle with the issue of how do I create a rating scale that makes sense of chocolate, a rating scale that recognizes that, unlike wine or unlike beer, chocolate contains fat, right? And a lot of the chocolate that gets produced is flavored in rather exotic ways, right? So I had been in contact with Alex Rast. You may know that name because of his connection to the International Chocolate Awards and the International Institute for Cocoa and Chocolate Tasting. And we were doing this over the Usenet, alt.rec.chocolate, I think is the forum we were talking on, chatting over, and wrestling with the notion of how do you create a rating system for chocolate? So what are the sensory things you want to rate? How do you weight flavor versus aroma, right? For example, and how does texture? So there's all that kind of stuff that is going on, right? And it turns out that I felt that I couldn't launch Chocophile.com until I had a rating system, right? And I will talk about rating systems in a different episode this month, because I think it's really important to, as we move forward, it will become more obviously important, right, in terms of how I think about my future plans. And so I mentioned that if you go to this this post, which is the welcome, the About the Chocolate Life post, that I teased going to the Fancy Food Show. And it turns out that I had the great good fortune, right? I don't know that. So luck is when opportunity meets preparation. So in that sense, I was lucky. I convinced the organizers of the Fancy Food Show, Specialty Foods Association, that I was legit press, right? And I was going to focus only on chocolate. Probably the first time anybody who said, I only want to talk to chocolate people. But I was able to convince them. Opportunity meets preparation. And I went to the Fancy Food Show in July of 2001, and there I met Gary Guittard. And at the time, Gary was running the family business, Guittard Chocolate. And I walked up to Gary. I don't know how I was directed to him at this remove. And I started talking about chocolate. And again, remembering that that observation that I had made is that I'm just not going to go up to him and ask him questions about Guittard and the chocolate and all this kind of stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share information with him. It's like the other things that I saw at the show that he may or may not been aware of, or things that I had learned about chocolate that I want to share with him. And so I'm trying to establish this two-way communication with him to help establish my credentials, my credibility, my bona fides. And I specifically went back in 2002 and 2003 and 2004, made sure that if Gary was there, I went and spoke with him and said, "Do you remember me? And this is what we talked about last time, and here's how things have changed." And so it was really, really important that I did this. And also at that 2001 Summer Fancy Food Show, I met a young guy by the name of Frederick Schilling, Freddie, and he was one of the co-founders of Dagoba Chocolate. And they were doing the first fair trade certified organic chocolate bars in the United States that I remember. I did have a conversation with Joe Winnie, and he said he was doing something slightly earlier, but it wasn't under his own brand. And so there may have been others that were doing both fair trade or organic prior to 2001, but Freddie was the first one I ran across. And so I had, again, the good fortune, some people may call it luck, opportunity meets preparation, to engage at very different levels. A small startup company in chocolate, one of the larger, if not the largest family-owned chocolate company in the United States. Well, actually, Blommer would have been bigger at that point, but I hope you get the idea that these relationships are one that I developed in around the same time that I launched Chocophile.com, and ones that I very, very carefully nourished. So between 2001 and 2005, I finished my last high-tech startup and full-time job. So while I was launching my career in chocolate, I had a job. It started the week before 9/11 in 2001. So it was the first week in September. I am going to my first job. It was the CIO, CTO of an online search company. That's what I was doing. And I did that for about 9 months, 10 months, until we couldn't get another funding round. But because I'm working on search and directories. So at this point, yeah, Google is really just starting to come on. Well, is really starting to dominate, but Yahoo is still there, and its a directory. So there's this Alta Vista, right? Excite. There are all these things going on, right, in this space. But I'm thinking about how would I create a search engine just for chocolate? How would I organize? So if I could say that I'm not interested in chocolate colored Labrador retrievers, I'm not interested in chocolate colored leather, I'm not interested in any of these topics, how would I go about creating a search engine, right, just for chocolate? And so I'm thinking about this, right, in 2001, 2002. I'm establishing and growing the community of not just Gary Guittard and Frederick Schilling, but all these makers who I'm seeing for the second and third and fourth time at the Fancy Food Show. By this time, I probably hadn't visited the Winter Fancy Food Show. It's still just the Summer Fancy Food Show in New York. I also started writing for Chocolatier magazine. And what I was doing was writing a quarterly insert, a newsletter called the New World Chocolate Society newsletter, which was inserted into issues of Chocolatier magazine. And while Chocolatier was really about recipes and chefs, the New World Chocolate Society newsletter was really about talking about chocolate in ways that Chocolatier magazine never did. Right. And at the same time, I started working with the publishers of Chocolatier were also among the organizing group of something called the World Pastry Forum and the National and World Pastry Team Championships. And so I am connected with this group and going to Las Vegas every year for 10 days and getting a chance, originally Las Vegas, then Nashville, Tennessee, then Scottsdale, Arizona. But I have a chance to interact with some of the top pastry chefs in the world. So you may know the name Ferran Adria, who is the exec chef, who was the exec chef, was the exec chef at El Bulli, which for many years was the number one restaurant in the world. I got a chance to take a class from his younger brother, Albert, who was the pastry chef, right, for El Bulli and was one of the proponents of molecular gastronomy. And I'm sitting there in these classes, I'm working with people, and I'm just, number one, making connections and learning everything that I possibly can. Maybe in 2003, 2004, that's when I first met Felklin, right, the Swiss chocolate making company. And so I was connected very early on when Volker Lehmann, who people may know from the Hacienda de Tranquilidad in Bolivia, right, sold beans to Stefan Block at Pronatec, and who is sourcing cocoa beans for Felklin. And that's the first wild cocoa chocolate bar, the Cru Sauvage, that Felklin produced. I think the first production run was in 2006, if I recall. Might have been the 2005 or 2006 harvest. I'm not sure. But, right, 2 years later, I'm in Schwyz, which is on the eastern edge of Lake Luzerne, for the 100th birthday of Felklin, as one of only a number of invited guests to that multi-day celebration. Again, I'm not doing any of this, right, to the reason why I'm doing this is I want to establish, right, a foundation for how I got to where I am today. That's what I'm going to do. I personally believe that if you sit back and you think about your life, where you've been, what you've done, you might find that you have a lot more interesting things that have happened in your life than you remember, and the connections. So for example, I met completely coincidentally Louis Rossetto, who is at that time publishing a magazine out of Amsterdam called Electric Word, right? And I met him and his partner, Jane Metcalf. This was at TED 2, 89, 90. Who else was there? Douglas Adams was there. For anybody, I mean, maybe it's where I got fascinated with the number 42 for the first time. I had met Herbie Hancock when I was working in radio in Portland, Oregon in 2000, maybe at a concert. And there he is again, a decade later. I'm sitting talking with Herbie Hancock. Didn't remember me, but he remembered the circumstances of our meeting because it was a tour where he was performing with Chick Corea, just the two of them on stage with concert grand pianos. Right? And so I was able to refresh that connection. I haven't connected with him since, but that was a key moment meeting Jane and Louis at TED 2. They visited me at Rebo Studio, the HD production company, 3 or 4 years later, asking about producing an HD version of a magazine that they were thinking about introducing, Wired. So they're still pitching Wired magazine for funding and to find a publishing partner, but they came through a mutual contact. They came to me at Rebo and said, "Can we produce an HD version of Wired magazine?" So they came back into my life, right, a couple of years later, and then 4 or 5 years later, right, 4 or 5 years later, a guy whose his name escapes me at the moment. Um, um, the founder of TCHO, Timothy Childs, came to me and said, "We've got this new chocolate company." I had known Timothy because of a previous venture that he had been engaged in, and it turns out that Jane and Louis were some of the two earliest outside investors in chocolate. So we met at TED, connected over HD, and then years later we connected via chocolate. And I got Jane and Louis to be able to present Cho and their vision for Cho at a conference up in Napa in early 2008, around the time that I shuttered chocophile.com and created thechocolatelife.com. All of this stuff is going on at the same time. And it's very, very cool and very, very, very fabulous. And again, what I encourage everyone to do who is involved, well, everyone to do, I don't care where you are in your life, whether you're 20 or whether you're almost 70, as I am. I will turn 68 this month. So another thing about June is that it's my birthday. So at the end of the month, and I will be 68. That's correct, this year. No matter where you are in your life, I would really be surprised if there aren't some situations like the ones I'm talking about in your life when you start thinking about them. And I encourage you to do it because it's a really empowering thing to do. I mean, this universe is so large. The world is so large. The earth is so large, right? And you go through it, and it's real easy to think of yourself as this little speck, but if you think about the connections that you have to people and where you've met them, and then use that understanding as a way of understanding ikigai and finding out what I can do and what the connections are and what your inspirations are, I think I have found it to be incredibly empowering. And I urge you to do it as well. Right. And in the same time, 2003 to 2005, I made my first two trips to a producing country. So I went to Ecuador in 2003 and in 2005 with Pierre-Ric Chouard and his University of Chocolate trips. And 2003 for me was a revelation because I had everything that I knew about cocoa and chocolate, everything I knew about cocoa, especially everything that I knew about cocoa was something that I had learned, right, reading a book or watching a video. None of it was firsthand experience. So going into Ecuador, flying into Quito, then getting into a little plane and flying into Coca, and then getting on a boat and going up the Napo River upstream to start with, and spending 3 days in the Napo, visiting my first cacao farm. And it was on a rainy day, and we walked 2 kilometers inland from the beach, and the farmer is there, and it's a miserable day because it's raining so hard. And it's where everything that I thought I knew about cocoa just sort of crystallized in my brain, right? All these things. I felt I had been an imposter up to this point because I didn't have the personal experience. I was only talking from other people's experience. And then having that same experience again in 2005 really, really cemented a different part of Ecuador. But it really, really cemented what's going on. And this is leading up to the time when I'm about to be asked to write a book called Discover Chocolate. And it turns out, looking back at it now, after 18 years removed, it was a book that needed to be written, but it wasn't the book that should have been written. And I'll go to that a little bit later in the last couple of minutes of the show. But in the meantime, I want to give a quick shout out to Mike King at Encore Coffee in Kansas City. Mike, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And listen, I hope your business lasts as long as mine has, and we have the opportunity to continue to meet and get together and talk about chocolate and coffee and all sorts of other things. I'm curious to know what you think about my ideas about what chocolate can learn from coffee. Do you agree, disagree? You can put them over in the comments on the post on the Chocolate Life. But, right? So checking in, all of the above, right, that I've talked to you so far, and the countless other experiences set the foundation for what I want to do and what I want to do with your help, right, over the next decade or so. All right. And that's right. I have a plan, or I have projects that I want to work on and complete within the next decade. And one of the ways you can help me is you can become a lifetime member of the Chocolate Life. So you can click on this button, it'll take you to a page, and it will explain what lifetime memberships are all about. And becoming a lifetime member will give me more of the resources to produce the in-depth the in-depth explorations of Lane Kilpatrick, the Chocolate Scorecard, Tony's Chocolonely, doing that work. But if you don't have the resources to become a lifetime member, there are other levels, beginning free. There's always been a free membership, but then for as little as $5 a month, you can go and support the work that I'm doing here. Right? So here are some things going on. One of the things that I have to do is I have to take care of some old business. I mean, I'm a fairly controversial figure in many, many respects. And even though I personally have never attended AA or any kind of similar Friends of Bill kind of 12-step program, I understand about the 9 steps. And one of the things that I have to do moving forward is I have my own 9-step requirements that I need to fulfill. And this is something that I want to take care of in 2026. I mean, I just need to take care of them. It's baggage that's holding me back. And I want to acknowledge I'm not perfect, right? No one is. I have made mistakes. I acknowledge they need to be made. I don't need to tell you what they are, but I need to go to the people whom I have wronged inadvertently, right? To let them know that I need to make amends and reparations where I can. Second thing, I thought I was going to do my 25th anniversary tasting celebration event in the month of June. And I decided to take a different approach. And so on Thursday, the 5th of November, which is going to coincide with the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival, which is happening in Rushville, Indiana, on the Thursday before the Friday when the festival starts, I'm going to be doing a hybrid live remote tasting celebration for my 25th anniversary. And I'm going to be featuring winners from the Craft Chocolate Challenge. Now, if you're in Rushville, we can sit down in one place and we can have the tasting. If you can't be in Rushville, we'll send you a box of chocolates. Then you'll be able to start ordering sort of mid-September into early October. We'll have a complete list of all the chocolates. They will all be, I'm hoping, associated with the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival and the Craft Chocolate Challenge. So if you wondered, for example, what Ember's elote bar tasted like, or you wanted to have something from Sweets Escalier, or you were really intrigued about the Anis Avocado bar from Honduras, these from Yohoa, Elmer Pineda, these are going to be the bars that are going to be a part of that celebration tasting. So it's the 25th of May, or 25th of November. Now put it on the calendar. And if you are a member of the Chocolate Life, whether a free member or any other paid tier, you will get notified in advance that you can order a tasting kit. And the number of tasting kits will be limited. And the number is 42, just because I'm a creature of habit, and 42 is the ultimate answer, the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe of everything, and chocolate is a part of that ultimate answer, in my opinion. Right. Another thing that I'm working on is writing the book I should have written back in 2006 and 2007, and without spoiling anything really too much about it, it's that there is something that wine and beer and cheese especially, but also things like balsamic vinegar and olive oils, there are things that those fermented foods have that chocolate does not. Cocoa and chocolate do not. And the next book is going to dive right into the center of that. And I think it's interesting that since 1996, so we're also looking at the 30th anniversary, right, of 30th anniversary? Yeah, 1996, 06. Yeah, of the foundation of Scharfenberger, that since then, nobody stepped into this space, right? And so that's the book that should have been written. If you're interested in knowing about it, let me know. I'm happy to share some aspects of it. You can come to the all-member call. If you're a member of the Chocolate Life, there's a monthly call. I've moved the monthly call for June to the last Sunday of the month because the 14th is Flag Day, and there may be a lot of no kings rallying on the 14th because it's Flag Day, and It's also the birthday of the president, and so this current president. And so I think I may be out at a No Kings rally if there's one nearby to me. But then the next weekend is Father's Day, and I didn't want to bump up against those 2 days when people might be out doing other things. And it will be at 10 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. So 10 o'clock Mountain Standard Time is the same thing as 10 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time. And it will be that Sunday. So my 10 o'clock, right? It'll be there. Um, if in case you want to join, but I am changing it. But it is the book that I understand that the world of chocolate needs, right? But nobody has stepped up to take care of doing it. I have been collecting the data for it, developing the outline for it over the last couple of months, and it's an interesting homage in some respect to a writer whose work that I express, but I really understand more about the the value of the achievement, the importance of the book and its predecessors for, in this particular case, beer particularly, and what it meant for the craft beer movement, growing the craft beer movement, not only in the United States but around the world. And I think it's about time that chocolate had such a book. The other thing I'm going to be doing is I'm accelerating the data collection project. So when I run, for example, not when I run, but when I do an episode, for example, on the chocolate core scorecard, and I say, well, you have a list of companies, but you have no URLs for any of the companies, and there's none of this other information that should be there. What I'm doing is I'm going through, I'm using LLMs and custom scripts to be able to take the data that's publicly available, download it, and organize it into a format. So I've been working on the winners of the International Chocolate Awards, which is a challenge because there are so many of them, but also the Academy of Chocolate Awards, the Northwest Chocolate Festival Awards, the Chocolate Alliance Awards, what they're doing, right? So every time I run across some program like that, what I'm doing is I'm downloading the data, and then I'm trying to find ways to enrich it. So, for example, can I find out what the website is, right, of the company? Do they have a street address? Do they have a phone number that can be contacted? Is there a page where you can go and shop? All that information. And eventually, the idea is to put it into a form where it's really usable and useful and available, and not hide all this location data behind a map pin interface where getting at, being able to do complicated queries, complex searches. Again, that's my background as in information technology with NFISH and other things that I've been doing. I do have this background in information technology with influences that stretch all the way back to a seminal article called As We May Think, which was published by then science advisor to, I think, FDR, Vannevar Bush, in which he describes something called the MEMEX, for memory extender, which is one of the first automated information management systems. So my interest in this stretches all the way back, and my understanding of things like that go back. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get that data collection projects, and I'm figuring out how to normalize them and regularize them, because each data set has different information presented in different orders in different ways, and getting them all into a format where you can say, oh, this is company names and all the company names. And if you have 6 different representations of the same company name, right, because you're pulling from 6 different lists, right, you want to make sure that the name is spelled the same way, the same time, right? Or you have a list of all the alternative spellings for this. So if you search for one, you get all of them, right? So it's much more challenging than you might think. It's not easy, and many of the publishers of this data do not make it easy for you to get at it. I mean, yeah, the Good Food Awards, trying to get the data from the Good Foods Awards was a nightmare. Automating it was a nightmare. Really, really challenging. And there are others that were far worse. But I've got the list of members of the Federation of Cocoa Commerce, which is a trade association based in London. and I've got data in there, and it's much more regular, right, than it is presented on the website of the Federation of Cocoa Commerce. So I will be completing all those things and trying to get it into a data warehouse where real a real understanding of the market, especially the specialty chocolate market, specialty chocolate and cocoa markets can be understood, right? If we don't know what the economic value of specialty chocolate and cocoa are, it's really hard to make a case for why specialty chocolate and cocoa are important. Right? So that's one of the key reasons. So that's something I'm doing. I've been doing it actively for years. I'm going to step up my game because now that I have better access to LLM tools, large what used to take me 12 hours can now take me 20 minutes, right? If I get things right. So I just want to let you know that that's something I'm going to be doing. But the biggest thing that I want to let everybody know about is that for the last several years, right? Um, so since sometime in 2024, I have been working to create an NGO, a non-government organization, a nonprofit, um, to be able to grow the markets for specialty chocolate and specialty cocoa. And what is specialty chocolate? What is specialty cocoa? I want to lean into what the Specialty Coffee Association has done, which is a specialty coffee beverage, is any beverage which is made from a specialty chocolate or specialty coffee bean. A specialty coffee beverage is made from a specialty coffee bean, and a specialty coffee bean is one that has received a grading of what is it, 80 plus, fewer than a certain number of defects. I don't remember, um, by certified graders, right? So Q graders, quality graders. And so what I want to get to the point of saying is that a specialty chocolate is any chocolate which is made from beans that are specialty cocoa beans. To make that equation, why? Everybody understands it, right? Um, that and I'm not focusing on, well, in order to be a quote unquote fine chocolate, which I think is a really bad word for this, it doesn't have to be a specific genetics. Well, specialty chocolate is only criollo. No, all we do is care about that the beans make good chocolate, right? And if enough people agree that these beans make good chocolate, I don't care if it's CCN 51. I don't care where it comes from. I don't care what the fermentation is. I don't care if it's single origin. None of that stuff doesn't matter. It's just, do these beans make good chocolate? And if the answer to that question is yes, it fits the purview, right? It fits the definition for specialty. Goner, well, in order to be a real bean, no true Scotsman, you can't be a real bean to bar chocolate maker if you have the beans roasted and ground in the producing country and then you finish the chocolate. That's not what bean to bar really means. Or you can't be a tree to bar company if you don't own the farm, right? Let's forget all those definitional fights. What does it mean to be craft, right? We'll get into things like that in the next episode. And I'm going to be devoting most of the episodes in the month of June to these topics and getting into them in much more detail. And because I want to hear from you, does it make sense to think about this? Is this direction right? Where would you go differently? Here's an experience that you have. I want to know what you think, and that's why I'm starting this. But the NGO that I'm going to be starting is called the Specialty Chocolate and Cocoa Alliance International. So the acronym is SCCAI, and it's pronounced SKY, as in the sky is the limit. And the goal of SKY is a big, hairy, audacious goal, is to grow specialty chocolate from 5% of the market in 2025 to 25% of the market by 2035. Why? Because it's an understanding and appreciation for what makes specialty will provide the resources to be able to make the fundamental structural changes that need to get made at the farm level going forward, right? As long as we let big industrial chocolate drive the narrative and greenwash, right, the fundamental changes that need to get made in the farm to factory supply chain when it comes to chocolate will never be made. And so by focusing on specialty and aggregating interest around the idea of specialty, making it as a big tent as possible organization, the goal is to help people understand why specialty chocolate is important, It's dependent on specialty cocoa, and if you want there to be specialty cocoa, we need to make changes on the ground, and that's the goal of it, right? And what I've learned in talking with people, and I've been talking with people, as I say, for 2 years, is that there are some fundamental structural governance issues, right, that go on with many NGOs. So the World Cocoa Foundation, it was, many of the World Cocoa Foundation members are signatories to Hark and Engel, right? And they were supposed to address all of the issues associated with illegal labor in cocoa producing countries more than a decade ago, and they haven't, right? And so, what is it about the structure, the governance, the membership of the World Cocoa Foundation that makes this impossible? The same thing is true of the International Cocoa Initiative, the Cocoa and Forests Initiative, the Rainforest Alliance, Fair Trade International. All of these organizations have fundamental structural and government issues that actually prevent them, right, from being able to implement the changes that they're advocating for. And so one of the things that Sky is being set up specifically to do, right, and organize, is to avoid those structural governance issues that would prevent Sky from doing, right, actually implementing, right, and achieving the goals that it wants to achieve. And fundamental to Sky is this data collection that I've been doing. You need to have an understanding. If you want to make good decisions, you need to have good data. If you do not have good data, you cannot make good decisions. These are fundamentally related. And so I will be talking more and more about Sky over the next month. I want to get it incorporated and funded in calendar 2026. That is the goal here. I've been talking with people. If you think that's interesting to you and you want to be a part of it, obviously, funding the startup is something that's necessary. But if you want to become a member and understand what membership means and all that kind of stuff, to be able to take a look at the governance ideas, our cocoa pricing reporting guidelines, which are important, all of these kinds of things open for discussion, because one of the things that this organization will do, Sky will do, is it will actively engage every single one of its members in key decision making. Right? This is not a case where the board of directors, the executive board, makes a decision and it's a fait accompli and it is handed down to everyone. Right? It's like, we have decided, and it's like, I don't like that. Why am I a member of this organization? And sort of architecturally, Sky fits somewhere between the Fine Chocolate Industry Association and the World Cocoa Foundation, right? In terms of thinking about the market, the way the market is structured. And it's deliberately intended to fit within there and address the limitations of all of the NGOs that I've mentioned. And I would throw in the Together Cocoa Initiative, the UK Cocoa Coalition, all these other programs that are sort of fundamentally, structurally, from a governance perspective, unable to be able to deliver on the promises that they've made. And a week from today, we're going to be doing the June News and AMA episode. So if you have questions about any of this and you want to jump on live and talk about any of these issues, or you have ideas, this is going to be part of next Tuesday's episode. But as I say, the focus of episodes for the rest of June is going to be around 25th anniversary celebrations. We'll be talking mainly about the future, right? I want to root it in how I got to where I am today, but then to talk about what's going on for the next decade, and then hoping that you will join me in that exploration. And with that, I'm done for today's episode of Pod Save Chocolate. I want to thank everybody for being here with me today. Thanks to Mike for connecting and commenting during the course of this. If you're not a member of the Chocolate Life, go over to the Chocolate Life, and what you can do is sign in, right? Join. You can join for free, and every member at every level has an opportunity to drop comments on the post on the Chocolate Life, right? But I hope what you'll do is, if you haven't already, is subscribe to the Pod Save Chocolate channel on YouTube, right? Follow me on LinkedIn. And again, my bad for not paying enough attention to when I scheduled this yesterday. It was my error. that led to this episode not being available on LinkedIn. I will, once burned, I will make sure that doesn't happen again. But I will be back this coming Friday. Not exactly sure what the topic is going to be, but it will follow along with one of the themes that I've discussed today, how I got to where I am, what it is that I'm going to be doing for the future, for the next decade with the chocolate life and more. And with that, everybody, with everyone, we're done for today. But I do want to remind you, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you just might be doing it wrong. Until the next time, everybody, ciao.